Same goes for patience. When you truly care for someone, patience is part of that byproduct. We know that as parents, especially when our children are small, parents have tremendous capacity for patience. That comes from this deep-rooted, unconditional caring for your infant. So you can see that patience can naturally come as a byproduct of compassion. Similarly, enthusiasm, again, if you are truly committed to helping others, enthusiasm comes in. Because when you are truly compassionate, then there is a sense of purpose. Helping others becomes part of your life's mission. And when you are able to do something, it brings joy. And when there is joy, there's no danger of loss of motivation. So enthusiasm is again a byproduct of compassion. Now, the last two perfections, concentration and wisdom, they are more complicated because they actually belong to a different category of mental training. So that's why in Buddhism, in the Indian and Tibetan tradition, we speak of two main facets of the path. One is the method aspect, one is the wisdom aspect. The method aspect could be, in crude terms, could be associated primarily with our emotional aspect of our experience, affect, as the scientists would call it. And then the wisdom aspect would be correlated more with the cognitive, inside side of our brain. So those two strands have to be cultivated side by side and also in conjunction. That's the reason why in Mahayana Buddhism there is such emphasis on the union of method and wisdom, union of compassion and emptiness. So that's the point. So now when it comes to the method aspect of the path, then taking compassion as your primary focus really gets all the other virtues as a byproduct. Now, of course, there might be specific challenges that you need to cultivate, for example, like whether it is emotional awareness or dealing with anger or those kind of things, you will need separate techniques. But generally, many of the other virtues tend to come as a byproduct if you focus on compassion. So that's the reason why someone like His Holiness is really so keen on dedicating so much of his life in bringing this awareness of the importance of compassion and promoting compassion more broadly in universal language. And sort of, and also one of the important things is that compassion can also be a powerful unifier across the different religious traditions, as well as between the believers and the non-believers. So that those are important kind of background information I think would be really helpful as each one of us, begin our own journey in, sort of engaging deeper with our own natural compassion and finding ways to cultivate it. So to briefly put, how do we then take these kind of insights and teachings of His Holiness and put it into practice so that compassion can become a more active force in our life? As I said before, the first thing is really awareness, paying attention. Now, awareness is a function of paying attention. Awareness is not something that you can will. Awareness either shows up or it doesn't show up. But in order for awareness to show up, you need to learn to pay attention. And then the first step would be to paying attention in your own life to when and how compassion and kindness shows up, whether it is coming from you as the source, whether you're experiencing yourself as a recipient of someone else's kindness and compassion, or sometimes whether you are struggling with the challenge of bringing kindness to your own situation, self-compassion. So paying attention is the first key step. The second step is to then, learning to develop conscious intention. So in Buddhist language, we call it intention setting, or we can call it, it's a secular. There's nothing Buddhist religious about intention setting. The intention setting idea includes connecting with our deeper aspirations. What is it that we want in our life? What is it that we wish for our loved ones? What is it that we wish truly for the world? Those are our deep aspirations. And again, we don't generally pay much attention. They either show up or not show up. But by being conscious, by paying attention, we can learn to connect with these deeper aspirations. And these deeper aspirations also powerfully reveal what we value most in the world. And values do matter. So that's one part of the intention setting exercise. The second part is then finding a way for these aspirations to inform our everyday intention. So it's not good enough to have deep aspirations. You need to make these deep aspirations inform your everyday intention so that they make a difference. So that's part of the intention setting exercise. And that's why for many Buddhists, especially in the Tibetan tradition, we do the intention setting exercise by simply repeating the chanting of the four immeasurables. May all sentient beings be endowed with happiness, and its causes. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and its causes. So we do the chanting, and then the chanting can help us set the intention for the day. But of course, you can set intention in a more specific ways on a daily basis. So setting intention is the second one. And the third thing is then, as much as possible, making sure that the compassion is part of your intention in your everyday life. So when you are dealing with a difficult situation, when you're going to have a challenging conversation with your teenage kid, or when you are having an important meeting with your work colleague, whatever it is, make sure that you bring compassion as part of your conscious intention in that interaction. So in other words, kind of tapping into compassion as a resource for motivation. Because as human beings, we are very complex creatures, and we have many competing motivation systems in us. We get motivated by fame, wanting to, acquire things. We also get motivated powerfully by anger, fear, which is part of the threat detection system. But we can also be motivated by wanting to be loved, wanting to connect, wanting to nurture. So those are an important part of motivation systems. And as human beings, among these complex motivation systems, in principle, although in practice it's a little difficult, but in principle we do have a choice which motivation system we tap into when we are confronted with a challenging situation. And of course, this is where the training comes in. The more we are able to train our mind, the more we are able to bring awareness more swiftly into the situation. And the more easily we are able to bring awareness, the more easily we will be able to choose the right intention in the right moment. It's of course easier said than done, but the logic is fairly straightforward. And I think this is where finding a way to apply compassion in everyday life. And even if you fail, and you will fail at the beginning in many cases, but what is important is not to beat yourself, but then to reflect after the fact and play it in your mind. How would I have acted differently if I had brought compassion into the picture? It's a way of reframing. And as you reframe through reflection, gradually it will begin to affect the way you deal with the situation. That's one way in which you can bring compassion as a powerful force. And then finally, having some kind of daily ritual to make all of this more a regular presence in your life is a really good. And this is why having a Dharma practice is a really good one, even for a secular person, having a kind of a regularity, so that compassion can begin to play a more active role. And one thing that you will notice is that the more we are able to bring compassion as part of our equation of dealing with the world, dealing with challenges, you will see a qualitative difference, not only in the nature of the response we are going to bring into the world, but also what we feel afterwards. Because quite often when we are not able to bring our best intention to this situation, after the fact we feel really bad about ourselves. And that leaves an averse taste in our mind, and that aversion then prevents us from further in future wanting to even go there, preventing us to wanting to even go there. So it creates a kind of a whole dysfunctional, negative kind of cycle around it. Whereas if we change our response, bring compassion more consciously, once we start doing this, that even after the interaction is over, we feel good about what we have done, how we have shown up, how we have shown up ourselves. So in this way, we create a virtuous cycle. And in the end, I always tell people that one of the most beautiful thing about compassion is that the more you are able to exercise it in your life, the better you feel about yourselves. And the better you feel about yourselves, and there's a beautiful line in Nagarjuna's Precious Garland where he says that a good Dharma practitioner will be able to go to sleep with a sense of ease. One wouldn't have nightmares. And that, I think it's simplistic, but I think it really captures something quite profound about the human mind. So this is why, of course, initially my advocacy of compassion has been, exclusively by being, serving His Holiness as his interpreter. But later in my own capacity, I've been able to have the opportunity to really kind of do more, play a more assertive role in bringing further His Holiness's mission to, sort of bring compassion as a universal, spiritual principle. So I would like to conclude this brief offering by reading a passage from His Holiness's book, Toward the True Kinship of Faith, How the World's Religions Can Come Together. It's of course His Holiness says this book is primarily addressed to the religious believers, showing that how compassion can provide the foundation for all the world religions can come together. But there is a beautiful chapter on compassion in that book. So let me read from that passage as the conclusion of my offering here. So I read, "The beautiful thing about compassion is that when it spontaneously arises in you, an inner door opens onto that infant's experience of love, which is part of our fundamental reality. From a secular perspective, given our biological nature as social animals, nurturing is an integral part of the human survival mechanism. Here too, without our mother's love and the infant's instinctive ability to seek and appreciate the mother's affection, we have no chance of survival. I often cite the evidence from medical science that demonstrates how simple physical touch by the mother or another caregiver is the most crucial factor in enlarging the physical size of our brain during the first few weeks after our birth. This shows how crucial the role of other people's love and compassion is for any person's survival and well-being. So to feel compassion for others is therefore to return to our deepest nature. When the inner door opens, it becomes effortless to reach out and connect with others. This is why the greatest antidote to insecurity and sense of fear is compassion. It brings one back to the basis of one's inner strength. A truly compassionate person embodies a carefree spirit of fearlessness, born of the freedom from egoistic self-concern. The quality of compassion is inborn, the inheritance of every human being, whether one is a believer or not. And on this level, there is no difference. Thank you.